Hi, everybody. My name is Yewande Akomolafe Kalu, but you can just call me Wendy. I lead the storytelling and branding team at Flutterwave. Today's webinar is a little bit different. The timing is different. If you've been joining our previous webinars, you know that we usually do it on Monday morning at 10 a.m. But today is different, and that's because obviously the situation that we're in is a little bit different as well. Um, I'm not going to waste time, doing the usual presentation that I do. And that's because I would like to give Coach G, who is our special guest and our speaker today, as much time as possible for her to be able to go through her session. Brief introduction. Gbemi Adekoya, or as she's popularly known as Coach G, is a licensed therapist and coach, and she will be talking us through today's topic within the webinar. If you've joined us as a business owner, if you've joined us as an individual, if you've joined us, as an employee, I think most people will be able to benefit from this from different angles. Obviously, we know that from a personal perspective, you have to be able to protect your mental health, but also from a business perspective, as a business owner, as an employee, you have to be able to protect your mental health because it kind of affects every single thing that you do. And so she'll be taking us through protecting your mental health in a time of crisis. And then we have Zainab, who will kind of, will bring it back to talking about what Flutterwave has available for small businesses at this time. We have a really exciting announcement that we just made today, actually, um, which I think some people here might benefit from. But we'll first go into Coach G's session, and then we'll go into the rest of the webinar. So I'm going to welcome Coach G now to start her session, and I'm going to stop rambling. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wendy. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you, everyone who showed up. My name is Gbemi, like Wendy said, and I am a therapist who has a big, should I call it bias for psychoeducation? Because I know that information can make all of the difference for us when it comes to how we handle crises. So I'm just going to jump into the Prezi, and I encourage you, if you have a question, to perhaps leave it in the chat, because I'm going to breeze through my presentation and then take questions, because I want to have enough time to answer all of your questions. So why are we here? We're here because life is stressful, point blank, period. And that's just a fact. It would be great if we could live in a world where we didn't have to stress out or worry about, the things that we worry about. But welcome to adulthood, I guess. And what then happens in a crisis, that it becomes even more so. So on a good day, life is stressful, but then you add a crisis on top of it, and it becomes almost like this extra load that we're not sure that we have the capacity to handle, which then puts a strain on us and everything else. So here's a couple of questions for you. Are we hinging our satisfaction on the absence of crises, which kind of asks us if we're saying, oh, if these crises are, if I never have them, I'll be fine, which would then make our goal to avoid, crisis in every way, or to escape or leave it if we do find ourselves in it? Or are we interested in increasing our capacity to cope with crisis? Now, I want you to think of those as two kind of like extremes. On one end is that idea that if I get out of it, think of how a lot of us have perhaps escaped Nigeria or made plans to escape Nigeria, or maybe we change jobs or we leave a location that's not, conducive for us. That's the idea that if I remove myself, right, then I can escape this crisis. Then there's the other opposing end that says, what if I increase my capacity to cope with this crisis? So think about like a Nigerian business will have a big generator, a small generator, an inverter, torchlight, all these things to help us to cope. So if you think of those as polar opposites, my question is, can we do both? Because it seems to me that there are pros and cons to each of the angles. The cons for hinging our satisfaction on escaping crisis or not ever having to deal being that that's never going to happen, right? The con, on the other hand, for always learning to cope is that you keep increasing your capacity to cope until you fall apart because you never then try to change environment or your surroundings or what's outside or external to you. So, my question and proposal to you today is, can we do both? Because I'm a big believer in and and being this idea that life is very rarely a zero sum game. And often we approach life as I'm either succeeding or not succeeding. I'm either escaping the crises or managing it. And I'm suggesting and proposing that we can do both simultaneously and both manage the external, what's outside of our control, and manage the internal, what's within our control. And I'll unpack that in a bit, but that's kind of like the premise where I'm operating from today. Right. So, quick intro. My name is Gbemi. Everybody calls me Coach G. I'm a nationally certified counselor. I have a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling, as well as a bachelor's degree in behavioral science. I'm board certified in behavior analysis. I'm I've completed my Gottman first level of couples therapy because I do family and individual therapy. I'm in the process of getting licensed in the state of Texas as a licensed professional counselor and licensed marriage and family therapist. I work with individuals, couples, families, and organizations. I lean heavily towards the theoretical approaches of cognitive behavior therapy, solution focused brief therapy, and evidence-based neuroscience because I'm originally a behavior therapist before I became a counseling therapist. So I'm really big on behavior change and what knowledge and information can do for us. My soft spot is neurodivergence. I like to work with neurodivergent families, especially kids. My specialty is in working with kids who are on the autism spectrum because I'm board certified in that field and I know the difference that information can make, especially for families of people with neurodivergence. So that's my soft spot. Information coach at behaviorcoachg.com is my email, and my website is www.behaviorcoachg.com. All right, next. Why does psychoeducation matter? Because when I thought about what we wanted to do today, I thought to myself, what would be the most impactful thing? Because again, I like the idea of solution focused therapy because I'm here like, okay, what are we doing? How do we want to get it done? Right? So the first thing that came to my mind was psychoeducation because I am of the opinion that information can make a big difference. So here's the thing about crisis. I know a little bit about crisis because I used to work on the National Suicide Prevention Helpline as a crisis counselor. So essentially, my job was to be on the other end of the phone if somebody was in a crisis and they called. And I did that job for a few years, working the crisis hotline, the domestic violence hotline, teen text. It was a bunch of helplines. And so I have quite a bit of experience working with people who, when they're in a crisis, they have the option of picking up a phone and having a live voice on the other end of the line. And my number one job was to de escalate. Because when a person is in a crisis, they're not thinking, not because they don't want to think, but the way our brains work is that when we're in a crisis, we go into what is known as fight, flight, or freeze mode, right? So, in all of my years working the crisis hotline, I realized that when a person is in a crisis, knowing what to do can be a game changer for them. And yes, it's helpful to have somebody on the other end of the phone who will pick up the phone and de escalate. But what happens if you don't have somebody on the other end of the phone? Is that it? Are you screwed? What if you live in a developing country where you don't have access to that? So that kind of made me start to think, what if we knew what to do in a crisis that we didn't need somebody on the other end of the phone for? Or what if prior to the crisis is when we build our capacity to deal with the crisis? So I have made it my duty to take the science of behavior, which I have learned as part of my education and experience, to make it really simple so that you can walk away from this session today knowing that if I'm an individual in crisis, if I'm a business, or if my business is in crisis, I have an idea of what to do. Because by their very nature, crises lead us to stop thinking, right? My other experience working with people in a crisis will be advising the federal government in my capacity as a disability immigration advisor and case manager for FEMA. When Hurricane Harvey hit about 3 years ago, it was kind of like my first experience with hurricanes, like hitting really close. Because the other ones that had happened didn't happen that close to me, but Hurricane Harvey really hit home because it happened like in my, local community. I spent I left my typical job and went to work with people who had survived Hurricane Harvey because I had what I now know to be survivor's guilt. And in doing that work, I also realized that preparedness before a crisis hits can make all the difference between how a person recovers from a crisis. Because Hurricane Harvey hit hard and people were away from their homes for some people for years. I remember visiting somebody's home and the whole building, when we pulled up at the location, and I was looking at the address in my GPS and I was looking at, it was just a piece of land. And by the time the homeowner pulled up and we got out of the car, she was like, here's the home you're coming to inspect. And I was like, wait, what? The whole house was gone. All that was there was a piece of land. How do you recover from that, especially if you have a disability? The capacity that you have prior can make all of the difference. So that's why I'm focusing on building our capacity to survive in the time of crisis. And I know from experience, from education and expertise, that knowing what to do when the crisis hits can be a game changer. So think of this as psychoeducation. I default to it. I love it. I know that it can make all of the difference. So having information makes all of the difference. And think about real life. We learn how to read, we learn how to write, we learn how to drive. Many of us are self-taught entrepreneurs. Did we learn about our minds and bodies and what's going on with us internally when we have to deal with a crisis, or even in like our day-to-day lives? Is not knowing impacting us negatively? I'd like to think yes, because in the past few weeks that there has been the crisis of epic proportions that has been in Nigeria, and again in the last couple of days with, dealing with the election and anxiety over here, I know that it's impacting a lot of people negatively. If anything, my workload has increased. So I do know that not knowing what to do can impact us negatively. My question is, can we learn now? Or should we say, nobody taught me? Is it possible that today the information that we learn can make a difference for us going forward in our individual lives and in our businesses? I like to think so. What differences would it make? I like to also think a lot, because when we know what to do, that can be a game changer for us. Okay, next slide. Again, if you have any questions or anything that you want me to talk a little bit more about, remember to put it in the chat and I'll address them at the end, okay? So there's this thing called emotional granularity that I'm a big fan of, and I spend a lot of my time talking about. When you hear granularity, I want to encourage you to think granules. So like tiny grain, the tiniest little version of it. And this, I don't know if you all can see this wheel. I'll put a link to it in the chat when I'm done so that you guys can look at it, download it if you need to. But this is called the emotions and the feelings wheel. And I use it a lot in my work because I have come to realize that just like me, before I started to learn about the brain and behavior and clinical mental health, a lot of us don't know that we're capable or that we have the capacity to feel all of these feelings. This is a really wide spectrum of feelings. If you can look at it, there's like fear, anger, sadness, all of these feelings. And we have the capacity to feel all, not some, all of these emotions. So if there's one thing that I would like you to take away from here, It is that you not only have the capacity, you have the permission to feel all of your feelings, even if before now you have not had the opportunity to learn how to. There are no good or bad feelings. Feelings are just your body's way of experiencing what's going on in your mind. Your feelings are supposed to be felt. So think about the word emotion. So I want you to think about the motion part. Feelings move, right? They're kind of like clouds. So your feelings are passing, and as they pass, you're supposed to feel them. Could they possibly feel uncomfortable? Absolutely. But remember, they're neither good or bad. We're supposed to feel them. When we're in a crisis, seeing as we're speaking specifically to crisis today, we can get jammed, like our feelings get jammed. Why? Because we're feeling a wider range of feelings, perhaps new ones that we haven't felt before, and we're feeling them more intensely. So, what that happens is that that stretches us. For example, I want you to have this visual in your mind of what I like to call a framework. So, think about like a building. We all have things called mental frameworks, which is kind of like how life is structured in our minds and in our brains, of how things are supposed to be. When something happens that's beyond the scope of what you thought possible, for example, you have a business and you show up one day and a fire has gutted everything down, that framework can literally collapse because the event that happened exceeds your capacity or exceeded your capacity of what you thought was possible. So that's what a crisis is like. When something happens that's beyond what your framework can handle, then you're in a crisis, right? Now, back to what I said earlier, you prepare for a crisis before you're in the crisis, right? But let's say you're already in the crisis and you don't have you're not prepared. Then that means that you're less likely going to be able to deal well than if you were prepared prior to the crisis. So, is it possible for us to learn to deal with the crisis, especially internally and emotionally, prior to the crisis happening? Absolutely. And that's why we're here. So, let's talk about our brain. I'm really fascinated by the brain and the connection with human behavior, because a lot of it used to seem like, spooky science because we didn't know what was going on. But again, the knowledge and the information we have can be game changers for us. So, what if we learned about our emotions, and what if we learned about what was going on in our brains? Would we be better able to deal? Again, I think yes. I'm going to use this illustration that I like to use often. I want you to think about a 10 or 11-year-old prepubescent girl who has never learned about periods, who doesn't know what a uterus is, who doesn't know that every 28 days or so she's going to get something called a period and she's going to bleed. Now, I want you to picture that little girl and imagine what will happen to her the first time she gets a period. Some of the responses I've gotten are that she will feel anxious, that she will panic, that she will be afraid. And yes, those things are true. She will not knowing what's going on with her, she's very likely going to panic, to think, oh my God, I'm bleeding, I'm broken, what happened to me? Now take that exact same girl and provide her with reproductive and sexual health education. Let somebody just tell her that you're going to get your period, you're not broken, you're going to bleed, this is what's going to happen. That same individual goes from fear to a response of perhaps being better prepared, perhaps even being excited as she anticipates this change that's supposed to happen. Now, that's how I want to encourage you to think about feelings, is that if you're not prepared, or if you're not aware that you're going to have to deal with all of these feelings, you're very, very likely going to fall apart for something that's only a normal, natural reaction, just because you didn't know, because nobody prepared you. So I'm saying that if we become aware of what's going on inside of us when we're in a crisis, and before we fall apart or before we start to have physiological reactions to feelings and emotions, we can be better able to handle. So what goes on in our brain, the connection between our emotions and our brain when a crisis or an unexpected event happens? That's what I want to explain to you. The way our brains are wired, I want you to look at my hand. I have my hand on the side and I hope you can see it. This is kind of how our brain is. This thing is called the hand model of the brain. And while I like to use it a lot and I enjoy explaining it, it wasn't my idea. I didn't invent it. Some amazing psychiatrist guy called Dan Siegel did a lot of neuroscience research on the brain and what happens when we're feeling different kind of feelings. And he came up with this really simple explanation. So we have something called the hand model of the brain, which is why I have my hand up in a fist, right? So our brain is kind of like divided into two parts, technically three, but two of the parts we call the downstairs brain and one of the parts we call the upstairs. So just follow my hand as I explain this to you. So we have the downstairs brain, which is our reptilian brain. It's where we have the fight, flight, or freeze response. It's like the oldest version of the brain ever. It's the one that when babies are developing in the womb, that's the one that starts to grow. Reptilian, think lizard, basic, right? Fight, flight, or freeze, whether we're awake or whether we're asleep, those automatic responses live in the downstairs brain. Then we have the midbrain, the limbic system. This is where emotions and other feelings happen, right? The capacity to feel, the capacity to think. So think evolutionary and think reptilian brain or lizard brain, and then think limbic system, right? Dogs, monkeys. That's why we're able to teach dogs tricks and things, and they can show some emotions like when they're happy or sad, because they've developed beyond just the limbic, just the amygdala, right? The brain stem. They've developed the midbrain, which is called the limbic system. Then we have the third part, which is the advanced part of the brain, this top part, right? This is the cortical realm. That's where our prefrontal cortex and all the other parts of the top brain are. So here's the thing with our brains. We're born with here and here, but you see this part, it has to develop. And it isn't done developing until we're in anywhere from our mid-20s to our 30s, right? So the upstairs brain, Dan Siegel just simplifies it saying upstairs brain and downstairs brain, because what happens in the cortical region is different from what happens in the subcortical region. So to avoid the big English and not confuse everyone, we call this place upstairs brain. So think about that. That's the cortex, like the outside advanced parts that are still developing all the way up to our 30s, and the downstairs brain. So upstairs brain is the logical part that controls the conscious mind. This is the part that controls behavior and reasoning. It generates in teenagehood and fully develops in adulthood. Children aged 0 to 5 cannot optimally regulate their emotions because this part isn't fully developed, right? So when you say somebody doesn't have sense, that's what you mean, that their upstairs brain perhaps isn't fully developed. Then the downstairs brain. This is the part that controls our emotions and our survival instinct that trigger our bodily reactions like flight or fight, right? And this is where our unconscious mind operates. It controls our bodily functions and we react in survival mode. So upstairs brain and downstairs brain. So how does that concern you and how is that any of your business as an entrepreneur? I'm teaching you that if you know what's going on in your mind, in your brain, internally, when you're in a crisis, you can know what to do. Because guess what happens when you're in a crisis? Remember that you start to feel a lot of those feelings really strongly. So guess what happens here? This part becomes active and activated, right? And then as soon as this part, the limbic system where you're feeling your feelings and your emotion and fight, flight, or freeze, as soon as this part becomes active, what happens is that your upstairs brain is now disconnected because you need to think in terms of fight, flight, or freeze to escape. That's why if you see a fire or you're in danger, you're going to take off or perhaps shut down. That's the freeze response, right? Or you're going to go into attack mode because you're in downstairs brain. That's how your brain is designed to work. Because you see, this upstairs brain part, it processes a lot slower than the downstairs brain. This is quick reaction. Somebody comes for you, you two have come for them. That's downstairs brain. But upstairs brain, when it is connected, starts to think about logic, consequences. That's why a lot of the time after you have reacted, you find yourself asking yourself, what was I thinking? You weren't. Reason, you were in downstairs brain. So downstairs brain is useful for what it's useful for. Upstairs brain is useful for what is useful for. Optimally, we want to be able to go upstairs more and stay upstairs more, because the upstairs brain is our learning brain. It's where we problem solve. And when we're in a crisis, we need to be able to think so we can problem solve. But guess what our brains do when we're in a crisis? Our brains stop thinking and we're activated in our downstairs brain. So can we learn how to calm downstairs brain down so that even when we're in a crisis, we can have our upstairs brain connected and we can think through the solution to our problems? Absolutely, yes, we can. Because remember, our downstairs feeling brain is what's controlling our fight, flight, or freeze response. We want to be able to go upstairs and stay upstairs because that's when we can think about a solution. For example, imagine that you're cooking and there's a lot of heat, there's a lot of smoke, and the pot catches fire. Now, in that moment, I fully expect you to panic because fight, flight, or freeze response. Your brain is wired to respond quickly when there's danger. The problem with reacting in the face of danger, though, and not thinking is that you can actually make things worse. So if a fire happened like that, what you really should be doing, because we've learned from the people who know science, that that fire is fueled by oxygen. So if you put a lid on the pot, that fire will go out, right? But when you're panicking, guess who's not thinking about what is the most logical thing to do to get that fire out? Immediately, your brain is firing. You've disconnected from upstairs brain. Now you panic and perhaps pour water on the pot. And next thing, you have an explosion. What if you knew prior to that happening that you were supposed to just put a lid on the pot? And it's not only just knowing. If you don't know how to calm your downstairs brain down, you will know that you're supposed to put a lid on the pot, but your upstairs brain is going to be disconnected because you have done what? You have flipped your lid. So I'm telling you that a game changer for your life is, if you know this little bit about neuroscience, is that if you can learn to calm downstairs brain down when it is sparking and activated, you can make better choices, which means that you can thrive even in a crisis because you can calm your emotions and your feelings down because you have learned what to do, because now you know what's going on in your brain. So upstairs brain, downstairs brain, the goal is to go upstairs more and stay upstairs more. This part is automatic. You don't have to do anything to know how to do it. This part, you absolutely have to learn it. If you don't learn it, you're going to struggle a lot because you find yourself apologizing a lot, being sorry for your actions a lot, just because you act and react a lot. What you want to do, even in the face of all the strong emotions, anger, fear, panic, is to be able to stay calm downstairs, go upstairs, and stay upstairs. So all of that I just explained, when the hand is closed, our upstairs brain is on. We think before we act. Yes, even in a crisis, we think before we speak. We're in control of our bodily responses. We're able to focus. We can see things from other people's points of view. We can feel efficient and confident about getting things done when we're in upstairs brain. So when they talk about emotional intelligence, it's about being able to stay upstairs and use our upstairs brain. But when we're in downstairs brain, we act or speak before thinking. I don't know about you, but I can think of some examples of me doing that and then having to apologize later. We're not in control of our bodily responses, so we react in anger or fear. So we can literally be striking out and hurting ourselves. Think about when a person is in danger and they run into traffic and they get hit by a car. it was because downstairs brain lid was flipped. They didn't think, they reacted. What if they knew how to calm themselves down when they were in danger? They could be in the exact same situation and know how to respond, right? You feel too tired and stressed to focus. You see problems rather than think about solutions, because remember, when you're downstairs, you have flipped your lid, and your upstairs brain, your cortical realm, your prefrontal cortex, your cortex, all the places responsible for thinking, they're not working. You feel inefficient and you're unable to get things done. So if you leave downstairs a lot, it is my strong belief, seeing as I've been doing this work for a while now, that you can learn to go upstairs more and stay upstairs more. It's called emotional self-regulation, and everyone can learn it. So what are some of the things that we can do to handle or to learn how to go upstairs more and stay upstairs more and calm our downstairs brain down? Now, one of the things that happens to us when we know how to activate our upstairs brain is that we can now think. It doesn't mean that we don't feel the feeling of despair or anger or depression or sadness or frustration or all those possible feelings that we can feel. It just means that we know how to tame our downstairs brain and we know how to connect with our upstairs brain. We can now think in terms of solutions, right? So remember what I was saying about the fire, being able to put the fire out. Because you have been able to calm your downstairs brain down and you're no longer panicking, guess who can think, I need to put a lid on this fire. If you're constantly pouring water on a fire and escalating things in your life or perhaps in your business when you're upset, and then you say, well, they made me angry. Well, they made me do that. Or didn't you see what they did? It's because you're staying downstairs. What you want to be able to do is go upstairs. One of the first things that you can do to go upstairs that the neuroscience shows is to label your emotion. It seems really simple. I rolled my eyes when I heard it for the first time. But the thing about science is that it's evidence-based. So if it works, you better keep doing it. If you don't try it because you think it's simplistic, well, I mean, it's pretty much up to you. So science shows that when you feel a feeling, if you can get yourself to have the presence of mind to label that feeling. So when you feel frustrated, when you feel angry, when you feel sad, to be able to say, I feel angry. Your brain starts to squirt neurotransmitters that calm you down. And the way our brains are, you remember the brainstem is connected to our spinal cord. You literally release calming neurotransmitters that calm not just your brain down, but the rest of your body. It sounds really simple, but just being able to identify the feeling you're feeling and being able to open your mouth to say it literally calms you down. It's called name it to tame it. Again, I didn't come up with the science. A researcher discovered it. I read about it. I simplified it and I'm sharing it with you. So what am I saying? I'm saying when you're in a crisis, the first thing that you need to do is to have the presence of mind to ask yourself, how am I feeling? And if you remember that feelings will, again, I'm going to share the link with y'all. I have a screenshot on my phone. I used to have it up on my wall. Just getting in the practice of being able to identify the feeling. Remember emotional granularity, being able to identify the feeling, being able to then name it, to say, I feel frustrated, as your brain starts to calm your body down, just because you have the presence of mind to just name your emotion can make a world of difference. What then happens is that you're now in upstairs brain. And what can you do? You can then think about a solution. So what happens when you go upstairs is that you can now start to think about what to do. When I'm in a crisis, how can I respond? First, you have to be thinking. So we've solved that part. To get you to think would be to label your feeling, to name it. Now that you're upstairs, you can start to think about coping skills. What is my next step? You can think about first aid. I call coping skills first aid because, like with our physical health, when we're in a crisis or something happens all of a sudden, if we know the right intervention immediately, we can keep ourselves from escalating to the point where we will need to go to hospital. So if, for example, I have a cut on my hand or I'm cooking and oil splashes on me, just knowing what to do in that moment, or screaming and having a panic attack and falling down, the difference between those two responses can just be me being able to calm down, right? So I'm bleeding. I know that I can wipe it up with rubbing alcohol or methylated spirit, put a band-aid on it, can make the difference between me needing to take that hand to hospital just because I was panicking and I didn't know what to do, right? So I'm not saying that calming yourself down will solve the problem. I'm saying it can now help you engage your brain to cope in a time of crisis. So you can then use your coping skills. You can then start to explore options, because when you're in a crisis is when you need goal-focused decision making the most. But if you're not in upstairs brain, you can't do goal-focused decision making. What does goal-focused decision making look like? It looks like, where am I going? What am I trying to achieve? Which choice is going to get me there? If this choice is not going to get me there, why am I making it? For example, I'm headed out to a 9 o'clock appointment, and on the way, somebody overtakes me or drives rough and now wants to fight, right? I have several options. I can actually pull up and let the fight come on, right? Because who's going to check me? I also have the option of ignoring and driving away. I have the option of teaching them a lesson, because what if I'm Mike Tyson? I have the option of rear-ending them. I have the option of blocking them and waiting until the police come to resolve it. I have so many options. How do I know what option to take and which one is going to help me? Goal-focused decision making. So quick question that I can ask myself after I have calmed my downstairs brain down, right? Quick question. What do I want? And the answer is to get to my appointment. Will stopping to fight this person get me to my appointment on time? The answer is no. How do I know what choice I'm supposed to make? But you can literally stop there and decide this fight has to come on today. How do you know which choice will best serve you? If you haven't calmed downstairs brain yet, you're going to be doing a lot of sparking, a lot of tearing shirts, or sometimes a lot of inaction, not addressing things you're supposed to address because you don't know how to think through it, right? So if your choice is action, if your choice is inaction, that choice better be an informed choice, and you can only make it, especially when you're in crisis, when you're in upstairs brain. Then that's when you can think about seeking professional help. So for example, if it's a financial problem, if you're in downstairs brain, imagine that you get to work and the numbers don't look good and you think that one of your staff has been stealing from you. You have so many responses that you can give. You can be in downstairs brain and curse everybody out and fire all of them and then never see them again. Or you can calm your downstairs brain down and think through. It's when you have calmed your downstairs brain down that you can think through that, you know what, I don't have any evidence. Maybe I need to set up CCTV so I can actually catch them in the act and see what's going on. Knowing that that's the right, I guess, financial choice is because you use your upstairs brain, right? So if you're then going to seek professional help, financial help, to know that you can, for example, if you have a client who's really problematic, I mean, I don't know about you, but some clients really, really deserve for you to give them a good talking to. How do you know how to self-regulate to the point where you can choose to use your customer service skills that you've learned? If you're in downstairs brain, you can't. And before you know it, you're responding to your clients on Instagram, giving it to them because they had better not come for you. Do they know who you are? Then you're the one who's left with egg on your face because you're responding from downstairs brain. Now what? After all of this explanation that I've given, so now what? I'm still in a crisis though. You might be saying that. And all of this talking and you couldn't make the crisis go away. Well, remember that period analogy from earlier? That's what life is like. You're still going to get the period. That 11-year-old prepubescent girl I was talking about earlier, she's still going to get the period fact of life. You're still going to get crisis situations that you don't like. The only difference is that now you know what to do and how to handle it differently. So now Let's talk about what you are going to do after you've been able to calm your downstairs brain down. This is the part where we discuss. I'm looking at the chat, and I'm looking at the Q&A. So this is a good time to use it. And I see a question in the chat already. You guys are hilarious. Apart from evil attack, what are the other causes of brain problem? Can overthinking cause brain problem? I'm going to take evil attack to mean, I guess, things that cannot be explained, like circumstances that are, like, cannot be explained, that are beyond like human explanation, right? So can those cause brain problems? I mean, I guess so, but can overthinking cause brain problems? I think not. If I understand you correctly, I'm hearing you say, can overthinking something cause you to have brain problems, or maybe for you to be in downstairs brain? Well, perhaps, because some of us get stuck in loops, in negative loops, where we're unable to break the cycle of negative thinking until we get stuck, right? So can overthinking create problems for us? I like to think that the answer is yes. Do we have any other questions? I'll be happy to answer them. Now's a good time.
That was really insightful, I think. I think it was really great. We're going to go into Zainab's section now while we wait for questions from attendees.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm going to start the presentation with the video. Let me just share my screen. Right, so let's watch this short video and then we'll take it.
Success in your online business look like? What are the ingredients needed to succeed in selling online? Here's the obvious hint. You need the Flutterwave store. Here are the ingredients you need to succeed. Great product images, responsive layout, default payments integration, instant notifications, fast checkout, and even delivery. If you have no coding skills or knowledge, you're just as welcome, because the Flutterwave store doesn't require any. You can create a store for your business for free and start selling in 5 minutes or less. Step 1. Visit www.flutterwave.com/store and click on Set up your store for free. Step 2. Complete the sign-up form and click Get Started. Step 3. Check your email inbox for verification mail and click on the link. Select how you want to accept payment. Step 4. Click on Store in the side menu of your admin panel, fill in the details, and take it online. Step 5. Add products and start selling. Create your own online store today and receive payments from around the world. The Flutterwave store. Just sign up, list, and sell. It's that easy.
Okay, so right, I'll just go straight on to the presentation. I hope you can all hear me. Okay, so the video we just watched basically is talking about the Flutterwave store, which is a very quick and seamless way for business owners to pivot their businesses online. Of course, we all know what's been happening around Nigeria, not just Nigeria, around the world, right? It's been a very, very unusual year. From the beginning of the year, you know, we had the pandemic, you know, businesses had to go on shutdown mode. We had to lock down a lot of businesses. And just when things were beginning to pick up again, for those of our participants in Nigeria, you know, the recent crisis that happened, again, businesses, you know, had to shut down, you know, the country was put on lockdown, most states anyway. So it's not been a very easy year for SMEs. You know, 2020 has been pretty difficult. It's been crisis mode literally from the beginning of the year till now. So we realize that a lot of businesses have, you know, have suffered. They felt the impact, especially those businesses that do not have an online presence. So you are maybe just a corner store, you have just a physical location, you don't have any online presence, you probably would have felt this, a lot more than other businesses who have been able to, sort of have like an online presence where they're able to receive payments. And that's part of the reasons why Flutterwave came up with a couple of initiatives, which I'll talk through very briefly. One of them, I think the major one for every business owner is the Flutterwave store, which is typically just allowing you pivot your business online. Think of it as your own mini website. You're able to put up products, images of products you're selling, put up descriptions about those products, and then you can now publish your store link, across social media, send it to your customers via email, send it as a WhatsApp blast, whatever it is, whatever communication channel that you have going with your customers, you just send your Flutterwave store link to those customers, and then they're able to click on the link and purchase from you. It basically just allows them access your mini website, and then they can buy any of the items that you have listed on that store, pay you online, and then you get that notification that the transaction has been successful, and you're able to send whatever item they've purchased directly to the customer. So think about it, there's been no physical interaction, but the transaction has still gone through, right? All you need to do is get your delivery partner to pick up the item and deliver it to the customer. So the Flutterwave store is a must-have for every business owner, because you need to have that online presence. I mean, look at this year just as an example, a lot of things we didn't expect, although going forward, now that we know that we need to, think about, things that happened even before they happen, just like Coach G has said, going forward is going to be a lot easier to manage, if you find yourself in a crisis situation. And one of such ways to prepare yourself is to ensure that you have an online presence, which is basically setting up your business on the Flutterwave store. So it allows you receive payments from customers anywhere in the world. Local and international payment options are available. Customers can pay you using their cards, using bank transfer. They can pay using USSD. So we have multiple payment options available, just to ensure that your wide range of customers have their preferred option available on the Flutterwave store. And for every payment made, of course, the customer gets an electronic receipt. You as the seller, you also get an electronic receipt sent to your email. And you can also log on to your Flutterwave dashboard to see details of every payment that has gone through. So it's free, it's easy to set up. You don't need to have a website developer, you don't need to have like a technical resource do any setup for you. It's very intuitive. All you need to do is access the Flutterwave website and then create your Flutterwave account and set up your store. Easy peasy, just like you saw in the video. You can do it in less than 5 minutes and you're good to go. So the Flutterwave store is a very useful tool, especially in a time such as this, for every business owner to own. And please, if you have any inquiries, please feel free to put the questions in the Q&A segment, and then we'll be happy to answer them. So Flutterwave Store is just one of the initiatives that we have going for business owners. Of course, this webinar, the Grow My Business webinar, is also one of such initiatives. We get industry experts to come talk to us about useful, topics, useful tools that are very, very relatable, where we find ourselves. So Coach G, for example, is one of such industry experts that's talking to us about, mental health, because it's been a roller coaster of emotions really the past couple of weeks, months, in fact, the whole year, right? So you need to protect your mental health. It's just an example of the kind of speakers that we come to, that we bring to our webinar to talk to business owners and even individuals. So it holds every 2 Mondays. Today is a bit unusual. It's holding on a Thursday, but going forward, it holds every 2 Mondays by 10 a.m. West African time. So please let every business owner tell them about the Grow My Business webinar. It's free, it's informative, and you always have access to materials that you could find useful even after the webinar. Of course, it's being recorded, so you also have access to watch the replay on YouTube as well. So Grow My Business webinar is another initiative. We've also partnered with Google to provide free listing of businesses on Google My Business. Again, because of the time we find ourselves in, as a business owner, you just have to have that visibility, right? It's a struggle. Everybody's, literally grasping for the same set of customers. So you need to find a way to stand out. And so we, in Flutterwave, we partnered with Google to provide free listing of businesses on Google My Business for free. Google My Business is basically a platform that allows you showcase your business whenever a Google search is done. So we provide that access to all Flutterwave account holders for absolutely free. After this webinar, we're going to send you an email, and the email is going to have that link for you to opt in if you want your business to be listed on Google My Business. So if you click on the opt-in link, it's going to get some information from you, and then a Google representative will reach out to you to get your business listed. So that's another initiative. We partnered with Google. We also partnered with Visa to provide discounts to Visa card holders whenever they shop on selected Flutterwave store merchants website. So it's called the Visa Dealathon. It's still ongoing. If you've got a Visa card and you go to, there's a link which we'll share, we'll put it in the chat. If you go to that link and you see there's a list of about 120 Flutterwave store merchants. So if you shop on any of those store merchant sites with a Visa card, you automatically get 10% discount. So it's just some of the things that we've put together to help businesses grow, in a time such as this. So we're working on visibility. We're working on providing you with access to informations and tools that will help your business grow. We're working with Visa, of course, to grow transactions for both our merchants and also provide discounts to cardholders. So these are just some of the few initiatives that we've put together for small businesses to help them grow, to help them scale, to ensure that they are still able to keep the lights on, even though, we're faced with, unprecedented times, right? Crisis, one crisis after the other, we still want to ensure that our businesses, our small businesses, which are basically the life blood of the economy, still are able to remain open and keep the lights on. So of course, we're still working with a couple of other parties to come up with partnerships that would help small businesses grow. So just stay tuned. I think Wendy mentioned earlier that there's a couple of other new initiatives. A couple of them have been announced. And then as we sign these partners on, we would also announce the partnership basically aimed at providing small businesses with all the right tools and awareness and publicity that they need to keep the lights on.